This is Zero Signal, where security leaders stop waiting for certainty and start leading through it. I'm Conor Sherman.
And I'm Stuart Mitchell.
Let's get into it. Zero Signal is brought to you by Sysdig. Threat actors are compromising cloud accounts in under 8 minutes. Vulnerabilities are being exploited within 10 hours of disclosure. That's the defender's window, and it keeps closing. Attackers aren't waiting on dashboards. They go straight for what's running. Real time is the only timeline that matters. And that's why Forrester named Sysdig a leader in its latest wave for the cloud-native application protection platforms. Runtime is where real risk shows up, and runtime is what Sysdig is built for. So stop watching and start defending. Learn more at sysdig.com and check out the link in the description. Today on Zero Signal, we're speaking with Andy Ellis, Akamai's first CISO, who led security there for more than 20 years, while the platform grew to carry more than 30% of the global web traffic. He's a 2021 CISO Hall of Fame inductee, investor, advisor, the author of 1% Leadership and How to CISO, and so much more. These days, he's advising security vendors on how to stop burning bridges with CISO buyers and how to start reaching them and helping CISOs who are helping organizations grow. So today, we're going to be diving into why vendors are pitching basically to the wrong person, how you as a CISO can be a better buyer, and how today as a CISO, where CISOs are being asked to sell, how can you still hold the room and hold the role with integrity? So that you as a security leader, when you walk into your next vendor conversation, know exactly where you stand as a buyer, how to manage your political capital like the finite resource it actually is, and how to help vendors make sure it's worth their time and your time, and make sure you both know how to earn it. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, let's bust right into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was this idea that basically vendors, the security vendors, the cybersecurity vendors are basically pitching to the wrong person. You've described a pattern where vendors are like basically sending contracts to a company when they haven't decided on products, or where there's this classic funnel of how to use marketing to draw awareness, and then they bring in the big guns and try and close the CISO down. And there's this whole world behind it. Could you unpack that for us? Because I think for many of us CISOs, we're unaware of the dynamics that generally exist. And then now we're in this position and we're kind of blind to what's happening around us. So let's just start there for a second. Vendors pitching to the wrong person and how we can course correct this.
So there's basically this dynamic that people think of the go-to-market functions as being marketing and sales. And that works in a consumer sales motion, right? If you think about Apple, right, they've got sales, their website and the Apple stores, and then they've got marketing, which is everything trying to convince you, all the ads that they're doing, everything else. And once you walk in and encounter a salesperson, you're already a buyer. You have decided that you are going to buy, whether it's a phone, or you're going to buy a car and you're on a car dealership. Like, you don't have to be convinced to buy a car. You just have to be convinced to buy this one. And what happens in enterprise sales is that's what people think that all conversations are, is we're just trying to close a deal that's obviously already here. And we're skipping the part that the person isn't a buyer because they don't believe what they need to believe to actually be a buyer. And when you think about it, there's this sort of worldview you're in once you're trying to solve a problem because you've come to believe in a problem. And in enterprise sales, we talk about like relationship sales, which really is the art of cultivating a person until they're ready to buy, and then, and only then, selling to them. And the best account execs know how to do this. So what I see happen a lot is a lot of vendors, especially in the early stage, basically treat every conversation as a sales conversation. That they get an opportunity to talk to someone who might possibly be a buyer, and they assume the person's already a buyer. But if the person's not a buyer, like, their defenses are all up, and you can't convince them of anything the moment they think it's a sales pitch. I just got a LinkedIn invite a few minutes ago email from somebody who'd harvested one of my email addresses out of LinkedIn. And it said, "This is not a sales pitch." My first thought is, and I don't want to give you, an explicit rating, bovine excrement. This is absolutely going to be a sales pitch because you just told me it's not one.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. And so you're not doing the right thing. And the challenge is we have the wrong metrics in many companies because we're metricing, our account development executives on how many first appointments they get. And the problem is that just drives them to produce more calls. But if 97% of the calls are negative, that's a lot of harm you're doing to your reputation. And so I like the phrase cultivation, because think about it like eating strawberries. I'm a huge fan. It's summertime now. Like you're going out to either any berry field and like you pick fresh, ripe berries and eat them. And it's one of the best things ever. And so imagine if you had a metric that said, how many ripe berries can you pick today? Well, the correct way to maximize this metric is pick all the damn berries and then figure out which ones are ripe after the fact and throw away the rest of them. Because nobody measured you on like, are you preserving berries for tomorrow? And that's what the conversations look like today is we're just hammering people and they're putting up their defenses. They're learning the names of vendors as someone not to interact with because we're not having the right conversations.
I'll step in there. I think a lot of this is to blame because we're in such a rush right now. I think like a lot of these, like if you're an SDR or an account executive, to be honest, you're a product of your environment, right? And if your CEO and VCs and sales leadership are telling you that like win at all costs and let's not worry about the bridges that we're burning on the way because hey, what if we don't get our Series B anyway? I think it's a really dangerous game that companies play. The one thing I don't think CISOs necessarily do a great job of is they immediately go to LinkedIn or to their network and say, hey, like for what better the word, F this company, F this guy,
Right.
because they called, but they're a product of their environment. I think particularly in their early career. And I think like you talk about the best sellers, they're really good at going to a product that's quite valuable, right?
Yep.
Like that's probably the best thing you can ever do as a salesperson is
It's
go to the
find
best
the
company.
right product.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Correct. Like,
Yeah.
and we'll go into what that actually means in a little bit.
Great sales reps are basically independent channel sales.
Correct.
They have a book of people that trust them. They'll go find a good product and they'll sell to that book and then they'll move on to another great company. And then the companies walk away thinking, oh, we have this solved. When the answer is no, you actually had this amazing channel. There was an independent person who just knows how to sell.
Exactly that. And, if you think about, let's say this great rep, like they probably have 100 to 200 really solid relationships. Their product's only really probably valuable to 15 or 20 of them everywhere they go, right? And I think that realization of like, hey, I know 200 great people, I can solve the problem for 15% of them. That's great. They'll still do fantastically well. If they close 15 enterprise deals a year, they're driving a nice car. Like that's the reality of it.
Very nice. In fact, they're probably driving a really nice car, especially if they can, figure out how to sell a much bigger deal than the company thought that was ever possible. I once had a rep who did that, who basically made a $5 million commission on a deal, made the company like rewrite all their commission things. But the rep was like, I'm not going to take the new thing. They said, well, if you don't take the new commission deal, we'll terminate you. And he's like, that's okay, because I get my $5 million and I'm out of here.
No one can do long division faster than your sales team.
Exactly. But Stuart, you mentioned a thing. I just want to really reiterate this for everybody who's listening, who's a security professional. The person who's reaching out to you, that account development exec or business development rep or SDR, like they've got 18 different names because we move them quickly. These are almost always entry-level salespeople that are absolutely doing exactly what they've been told to do. Do not abuse them. Like, don't name and shame them. If you want to name and shame their company, be my guest. But these are the people that you need to be the most charitable and the kindest to. It's the reason why, while I was a CISO, I had this email template that was called Vendor Rebuff. And in fact, if you just Google Vendor Rebuff, I think it's the top non-sponsored hit on those two words. That's literally, I would just click. It was a signature file. So I'd hit reply, switch to that signature and sent it. And it said, good day. I'm not your lead. Here's an FAQ for you. Please just go away. Take me off your mailing list. And I got to tell you, I got so much great positive feedback from these people who were being abused and ignored most of the time.
I want to talk two things on that angle. Like number one is I very much agree with you on the SDR, BDR world. Like they're just doing their job. You can be upset that you're getting phone calls and text messages and LinkedIn, all these things, but like literally that's just, they're doing what they're being told. So I remember about a year ago, I put something on LinkedIn and I was like, hey, be nice to people. And the amount of people came back and be like, wow, I'm going to go pitch to that guy. And it's like, no, you totally missed the point. It's like, just be nice to another human being. Actually, Andy, I'd like to get your take on something here because there is also this tectonic shift that's happening inside the CISO community as well. And it's quiet, but like a tsunami is forming here. And that is we've taken these operators for the last 10, 15 years, in some cases more, and they've built these incredible programs at different companies. And now they're trying to get into GTM adjacent roles, right? So they're coming in as field CISOs. They're coming in. I did a year as a CISO in residence at an organization, and it's like, and there's plenty of other people in that space, and it seems it's this really delicate moment that we're in, and a lot of people I don't think are appreciating. There's like a right way to do this job and a very easy wrong way to do this job. How would you counsel someone, a CISO, who's stepping into a field-facing role? How do they do this right? What do they walk away from? How do they navigate the tensions that come with that role?
So Gary Hayslip just wrote up an amazing guide on how to be a field CISO. And he's given me permission to republish it on how to CISO. I just haven't gotten around to retemplating it yet, but go read that. Here's the real summary, which is a lot of people are going to hire you to be a sales rep, and you're going to fail as a sales rep because you're not a sales rep.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not going to like that. And your CISO friends will stop talking to you if all you ever do is call them up and say, hey, will you take a call with this vendor? Or the vendor is going to get cranky at you because your friends will take the call as a courtesy to you, but they have no intention of closing a deal. And so you're wasting everybody's time. The right way for companies to use a field CISO, or for your field CISOs to approach this, is you're lending your gravitas to the company, but you're really lending your gravitas to the problem. What you're really saying is, this is a problem that is so urgent that I think it should be fixed, and this is a way to fix it. Right? But people want to hear why you think that problem's interesting. CISOs will show up to listen to you talk about the problem. The moment that you then turn and say, and you should solve it with my tech, you don't need to do that. That's what you have sales reps for, right? So you should really think of yourself as a message development arm, that you're there. And then when there is a sales motion, you are then the executive sponsor of every sales motion that involves a CISO. So as soon as a sales rep does have a call, you can call up the CISO and say, hey, I hear you're looking at this. Can I be helpful? Can I be a back channel for you? You're not selling. What you're almost doing is you're saying, look, if you have a problem with the sales rep, come talk to me.
I like that motion because I think that's what I did. So that's why I like it. But it's like,
I was gonna echo that, Connor. I think like if we look at what you did at RSA, I think with the Sysdig Lounge, you put together like 4 or 5 really interesting topics that weren't, hey, this is Sysdig and we can fix cloud security problems and like walked everybody there. You created interesting rooms, which again, I think with the Sysdig brand attached to it, but allowed for credibility and allowed for problems to be solved naturally. So I know that like it is what you did, and I wanted to give you your flowers there because I think you did an incredible job.
I would like mark today's on the calendar that I received flowers from Stu. Like I got some praise. What's today's date? Like,
yeah, that's fantastic.
Zero Signal is brought to you by Hampton North. I've been responsible for building and turning around cybersecurity programs for companies where a lapse in security just isn't an option. Finance, high tech, AI. Different domains, but the same truth. The programs live and die on talent. And no strategy ships without the right people who share the right DNA. That's why I partner with Hampton North. I've built 3 cybersecurity teams with them, and every time they move faster than anyone else without sacrificing quality. While other agencies are still pushing paperwork, Hampton North already had vetted candidates in front of me. Their executive search is not one size fits all. With one of the largest networks of security leaders in the US, their leadership roles hit the market in days, sometimes hours. And their go-to-market practice covers CROs, CMOs, revenue leaders, and full team build-outs for scaling cybersecurity businesses. They meet every candidate, they reference every story. If you're ready to build and scale and grow your security program, go to hamptonnorth.com and see why brands like Clear, Instacart, Airtable, and OpenAI trust Hampton North to build great teams. Check out the link in the description.
The key point there is like, absolutely, if you're a field CISO, you should know how to pitch the product. In fact, you should know how to build a better pitch than the sales rep so they can go use your pitch.
Yeah.
But then the most important talks you give are the ones that I think of as the pre-pitch talk. Now imagine that somebody's going to walk in and get the pitch. You would like their brain to be thinking about the problem before they get the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the talk that makes them think about the problem, think about the urgency, is aligned with how your company solves that problem? You're not trying to solve the problem. What you're really just trying to do is put them in the mental space to be sold to. And the most successful, and you can give great talks like this. Just talk about problems and philosophies, and then somebody walks by the booth that you're associated with and says, oh, hey, I just heard Conor give this talk. What do you guys do again anyway? But their brain is so primed and ready to listen to the talk at that point.
And if I may extend that analogy or that narrative one step further, it's like when they say, tell me about this product, your job as a CISO or the field CISO is to keep your mouth shut, get out of the way, and let the professionals do their job. And then if they're interested, you can come around basically like saying behind the scenes and say, like, hey, I'm here if you need me. Here's my lived
Right.
experience with this product, blah, blah, blah. Like I can walk you through it. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Absolutely. Like sometimes you'll have to pitch it. Like if you're the only one there and a CISO says, tell me about the product, you need to know how to pitch it. But if you've got a salesperson there to pitch it, let them pitch it so that they can develop the connection, right? Because now they can follow up with the CISO because you don't want to have to try to be every part of a sales motion. Because let me tell you, if you thought it was painful dealing with paperwork as a CISO, you should follow an account executive around for a while.
I wanted to segue back, talking about fields. I want to go back to our strawberry fields. We're talking about essentially if you're motivated by going and finding the right strawberries and really not giving a darn about anything else. Look, when a vendor does get that buyer model wrong at scale, they burn CISO goodwill, they cycle through reps, like what is the long-term cost of this? And is this do you see this more as like a training problem, compensation problem? Is it something a lot deeper in how security companies are built?
Yeah, so it's a combination of several different problems. And the first one actually is most vendors never sit down and just think about what is the message that I need to get CISOs to believe. Right. So they're sort of just swinging randomly. And I have a model, I call it the 9 buyer beliefs or the 9 buyer truths. And it basically says they have to have a location with a problem that's urgent. I like to just condense them into 3 so it's really easy, right? If you are selling AI security and you've got a company that is not using AI at all, they don't even have a location with a problem, right? So, years ago, I did this for one of the companies I worked with. I wrote this op-ed about is the death of the CIO. And I talked about how with the move to SaaS for everything, there was no longer really a need for a CIO separate from the CISO, and they would be combined because all companies would be SaaS native. And it was one of the most popular op-eds I ever wrote. The reason I wrote the op-ed was at the time, I was an investor and advisor for 2 SaaS security posture management companies. And the belief we needed people to have was that they were SaaS native companies.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this message. It's an amazing message. People really want to think about the evolution of the CIO CISO role, but the context is you're a SaaS native company because you needed to believe that before you would prioritize solving SaaS problems. So companies need to understand like this top level, like what's the market look like? What does a company need to have from a location perspective? What is the problem and how urgent is that problem? And if you don't know that as a vendor, why would you expect your buyer to automatically know that when they walk in the door? Because the CISO that you're talking to might have just come out of a board meeting where they're being yelled at over, some OT problem that's blowing up a factory floor, and you're now trying to sell them, on DLP, right? Their brain's not in the right space. They don't care about data while they're thinking about OT. Then you actually have to understand who the buyer is, right? Is the person you're talking to actually the one responsible for solving the problem? Do their peers believe that? And do their stakeholders want it fixed? Because if you don't have that 3, the organizational politics are going to get in your way, right? How many AppSec solutions fail because the CIO and the CISO disagree over who solves this, or the head of engineering disagrees, right? There's this huge tension there. And then ultimately, most AppSec solutions fail because the developers ultimately do not want this problem solved, especially not by the CISO. And until we solve that, we're going to have an AppSec problem. For those of you in the AppSec space, not that any of them are here, like that's a space that we got to worry about. And it's only then that you get to do product marketing, right? What are the different ways to solve it? Is this solution viable? And do you have budget? But that's where almost every company starts. They want to say, my solution is better and more viable than everybody else. And if you haven't gotten through the previous 6 questions, you're already screwed there. So that's one structural element of why companies get it wrong is they don't know what they're selling, right? They have a technology. They think they know the problem, but they don't necessarily understand and live it. And they certainly haven't primed their buyers to believe it. And then, of course, the second challenge is like a seed stage company, a Series A company, a Series B, and a Series C are all different animals. And they don't even realize it. People walk in at seed and they're trying to build a Series C company. And they don't recognize that at seed, you are selling a feature to a buyer, right? There is no product and there is no market. You have one feature because that's all you have built so far, and you're trying to get a buyer to buy it. Nobody's going to a seed stage company and buying a platform. And certainly not 100 companies are doing it. But you get 10 people buying your product, your feature, they call it a product, but it's not. That's really exciting. You might learn something out of that about what you actually need to buy and what you need to sell. But once you get to Series A, now all of a sudden, now you're trying to build a product. You're trying to find a product and a market fit. But at Series A, you might have like just a couple of sales reps. That's it, right? Every sales motion is bespoke. Your CRO is involved in all of them. You're involved in all of them as a founder. Like, you don't know what a repeatable sales motion looks like because you're rebuilding it every single day, and there's zero scalability. And at Series B is really where the scalability really starts to kick in, right? And how you know you're ready for Series C is you have built a sales rep development engine that you can hire a rep, you can convince them how to sell this product, then go out and sell the product, and it required no founder in that entire pipeline. And these are not the same companies. And what happens is, like, I've seen companies that will hire an amazing Series C CMO or CRO while they're at Series A, and it just flops because this person comes in, they're professional, they're like, I'm going to build an engine, I got sales enablement, I got sales training, and it's like, how many sales reps do you have? 2. Why are you building overhead on 2 sales reps?
God, I want to like spend like an entire hour on this 9 beliefs thing here.
Yep.
Because I think it's just so important, I think, for CISOs to have this language because our role is changing. Right there, especially if there are, and I have to separate, like, there are people who are operators inside of institutions and they have nothing to do with a go-to-market, and this would not be applicable. For a lot of you in the tech space, I think there's this awakening of like, hey, we have someone who can like speak to this community in this thoughtful way, who can lead this thought leadership and such, do this. So regarding those 3 pillars that you laid out, are there any of them that you think that the security leadership community needs to understand the most or the deepest? Is there any ones that they tend to be light on or they make mistakes around, or is it just to digest the whole framework equally?
Yeah. So I think, well, the framework is really lightweight. Like, I do this, I'll do, engagements. I've never done one with the CISO. It's a fascinating idea to do. I usually do it with a vendor. And look, in an hour, I will walk them through the whole framework. I'll teach their, field marketers how to think in this one. I'll do engagements where I'll literally take their whole product and their marketing apart separately and like line it up to them and say, here's the campaigns you need to have to go out there. I think that what CISOs often miss is, if you're a CISO, you can speak at like at pretty much any conference if you're a good one. Like, it's easy to get yourself out there. What you have to figure out is, how does your expertise reinforce the messages that you need to be getting out there? Right? You don't have to go out there and pitch the product, and you'll fight with your product managers. I actually had this once. I had a product manager. I was keynoting RSA, and I put a screenshot of another company's product up and said good things about it. Like, I was up talking about how amazing Duo was, because I was talking about how I got rid of firewalls and I had the very first zero trust network access, solution out there. And it was before we had really launched our product, but we built it internally. And then we launched it as a product. And I go up and I'm like, here's how I convinced us to get rid of the firewalls. And it was all because of Duo. Right? And it's like, it's this amazing. And my product manager's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, if I'd said it was all because of Akamai, first of all, RSA wouldn't have let me give this talk. But second, everyone would have immediately said, this is a vendor pitch. Instead, they said, this is a solution. You understand my problem. You have a solution. And you're not telling me that I can do it exactly this way, but you're telling me that there is a way to solve this. Come talk to me, right? And that's what you as a CISO have to figure out. Where is your expertise and what stories can you tell that will either advance the message or even just advance the brand? I would go tell stories just about like the internal security infrastructure we had built to make our platform safer. There's a piece of it that is about, making our solution viable to our buyers. They're like, oh, I would trust you. But a lot was just, I wanted to get brand out there. People would say, oh, wow, Akamai is an expert at big distributed systems problems, and my website is a big distributed systems problem. Maybe I should talk to them. That was it. That was my whole goal. And it paid off. Like, we didn't have great metrics on it, but the number of audits where like somebody in the buying cycle, we've all been now through the craziness of TPRM. I lived through it the early days, where literally a team would come in to audit us and someone would say, oh yeah, we already trust you guys. We heard Andy speak at a conference. And, on one side of my brain, I'm like, that's not how it works, folks. But on the other side of my brain, I'm like, fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah, you did it. You like if the final product of vendor diligence is like, do I trust these folks? And you could just shortcut that whole thing and get to the, yeah, we trust you. It's like,
Yeah,
all right, I guess that worked. That
that
works.
works.
So let's talk about the other side. I actually want to talk about this too about it's like okay, operating CISOs because come back to the house again. Like how can we be better buyers? I think this is an important thing too. Yeah, tell us more about what your perspective on that.
So the very first thing is to look, just be honest, right? The number of times that I've seen CISOs who are operating that they hem and they haw and they equivocate, like just say no, right? If a vendor says, "Hey, look, we want to talk to you," don't say come back next quarter. Just say, "Look, I'm not a good fit for this," and you can tell them why. Like if you say, "Look, I use one of your competitors and I love their product," that is actually great feedback. They're going to hear that and they're going to be like, "Oh, I need to focus on that." And that's going to be very different than if you're like, "Well, we haven't decided what we're doing here."
Do you think we have a steak dinner, courtside seats, like free swag problem in the security industry? Because that's it's you don't get if you say no quickly, you don't get a steak.
Yeah. So I think we have less of a problem that now because there's too many of those, right? Now there's these consortiums that are basically a group of CISOs with some project manager who will sell access to the CISOs, and you get a dinner out of it. And I'll be really honest, like I've had a lot of my companies have gone through those and they do not get the value out of it that they're advertised, right? Because these are CISOs who are just milking it for the freebies. And so that is a problem. I think that if you want to do a steak dinner as a company, you should, but at least half of your attendees should be your existing customers. These are customer retention opportunities. Get in front of your existing customers, talk to them, and have them help you fill the room.
100%. I'll use Conor as an example. I used to fly Conor into all my dinners. He was one of my champions as a client. And I'm like, hey, like you talk to my customers because you do a better job actually of selling than I do. And the same should be said. Like if a vendor has, 12 customer champions at a 24 person steak dinner, those 12 prospects are going to get a much better experience speaking to their peers than the sales rep. So I love that.
Yeah, and you shouldn't try to control the conversation too much at these events. I've seen people do that. I'm a really big fan of basically having like a few sort of questions, but then to say, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go around the table and each person will introduce themselves and then they're going to answer one of the questions as part of their introduction. And that'll start the conversation, right? So my questions might be like, what is your challenge around X? Like, did you have an initiative that failed? Whatever, pick one. And what happens is your champion's like, oh yeah, I had this problem. I solved it using this solution. And everybody else is like, oh, I have this problem. I don't know how to solve it. And it's this perfect, you end up with these side conversations that are your best sales conversation. And then here's actually for vendors, here's the most important thing. Have somebody who takes notes. The number of times I have seen vendors who are in a room with a group of CISOs who are talking and nobody is taking notes. So you end up with these, 8 or 10 CISOs that you're told were at this dinner, but you do not have a single note about what any one of them said about their problems that goes to that account executive to follow up with. Like, to me, that's just criminal negligence.
Especially when you throw, like, booze is probably involved too as well. So it's like they're not coming out with the freshest minds.
Yeah, because I would
bottles of wine.
I would do this for a while for companies where we during the height of COVID, especially everything was online. So I would facilitate these roundtables, and it was on a Zoom. So it looked a lot like this while we're recording. And I'm just sitting here and I'm taking notes. And I would take over the course of an hour like 8 pages of notes about what every single person said, what I thought about them, and then I would send them to the individual reps. And they're like, "I've never seen this before." And I'm like, "Why not?"
It is kind of wild because what ends up happening in so many cases is there's just that email, hey, great catching up yesterday. Let's talk tomorrow. And they have to rehash the whole thing again.
Right. And the problem is like they've already told you what their pain point is. All you have to do is now prompt it slightly and they're back in that mindset. Whereas when you have the conversation like, oh, now it's a sales call, they're very defensive because sales reps like to say, well, tell me about your problem. And I'm like, no, tell me about your solution. I'll decide if I want to buy it. But that's the bad conversation to have.
And I think people as prospects, we like to feel special and individualized, right? So if someone followed up and said, hey, how was Patriots training camp? Tell me about those signed Patriots balls in the background, etc., which I know you're keen to bring up. Like even things like that, like again, we go back to this incredible sales rep, right? Like that person with the 100 relationships that we talked about earlier, they no doubt do this thing where they are creating relationships that are enduring versus, hey, let's catch up to talk about my endpoint solution because I've got Quota, which is how we feel when those generic emails come through.
Absolutely. Like, I've got a client of mine that's a huge fan of the Green Bay Packers, right? So we have a football conversation more often than we talk about anything else. And we just know that every conversation, like, we don't have a half-hour conversation. It's going to be at least 45 minutes because we're going to spend 25 minutes talking about the state of football. So I'll mention the footballs here since you brought them up. I've got game-used footballs from Super Bowl 51 and from Super Bowl 49. And because those were both the other team's footballs, their fans didn't want to buy them from the NFL. And I've
so they're fully inflated then.
Yes, they're fully inflated, as were the footballs the day of the so-called Deflategate scandal. I do have to point out that anybody who thinks those footballs were deflated should go back and take high school science, but you shouldn't out yourself as being somebody who does not understand atmospheric science. But I'm absolutely with you on this. Like, football is one of the great conversation things in the United States. Everybody, or a large portion of people, talk football. Fitness, another great thing. I used to wear Vibram 5 fingers, and I would wear them everywhere. Like, I had dress shoes, the minimalist toe shoes. And the first time, like, a sales rep would see me, they're like, "You're walking into a customer briefing wearing those?" Like, suit, everything with toe shoes. And I'm like, "Yep." And I would walk in, and there was always somebody in the room who'd look down and go like, "Oh, you're a barefoot runner." And we'd have a conversation about running. And the sales reps were like, "Oh, I get it," right? That's your instant icebreaker.
I mean, I think you taught me that. It's like, yeah, I got to do you have to do American football, or soccer, or you have to be running. Like, pick a lane and just get really good at it, because then you can just talk to anybody, and mostly anybody who works across.
And in this day where we're almost all remote, and I'm going to make fun of Stuart here. Like, Stuart has the second worst possible background it's possible to have, because he's got nothing but a thermostat on his wall.
What's the worst? Jets?
No. I'll make fun of people with the Jets one. It's the people who just have the virtual background of their corporate logo with one bright color. Just kills me. Just don't do those. The ones I like is where you do like a conference room with your logo subtly on it, so it doesn't necessarily look like a virtual background at first. But make sure you don't have 3 people on the call with the exact same background. Right. I did convince a company I was working with to do this. I said, "Look, you have an actual conference room you're taking this is a picture of. Go in and take a picture from every seat in the conference room and give people a different background, so it just looks like they're in the same room.
Smart.
But it's slightly offset from one another, right? Do something like that. But if you're going to curate your background, which I highly recommend, everything in your background should be a conversation piece. Right? So if somebody looks at it and they peek, they're like, "Oh, I see your book there. When I was upstairs, I brought it down. I didn't have a place to put it. Like, I have a little miniature Louisville Slugger that's from when I spoke at DerbyCon." So I could be like, "Oh yeah, I can talk about, like, this is speaker swag." Like, that's what you should have, is a conversation piece. So when somebody looks up and says, "Oh, hey, what's that?" You now have a conversation.
And I think that's actually such a good pro move for anyone who's in this field CISO role as well, because it allows you to go back to what you're saying previously. The words I'd use is like, how do you move from being that guy to being a trusted advisor? How do you go from being a partner and a peer? And a way to do that is just bridge into these conversations, and you can set yourself up for success. You can create the environment that's going to allow and foster that transition from being a vendor CISO to being a trusted advisor on a particular problem space.
Right, because in a sense, when you are a marketing CISO, right, whether you're doing sales or but you're in that marketing function, part of your job is to be the CISO therapist and whisperer. Because the CISO will tell you their problems because they will trust you. And here's the most powerful thing you can do in a sales motion is say, "We're not the right fit for you right now." Mm-hmm. Instant credibility, because when you come back in 6 months, they're like, "Oh, now he thinks it's the right fit." And sometimes it's like you sell a product that is the third product they should buy in some problem value chain, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, you have this very big problem. So first you're going to buy an IAM, and then you're going to buy an IGA, right? So, okay, I'm the IGA. Or maybe I'm the ITDR. I said even downstream from that. So if I come in and I say, "Look, you don't use single sign-on. You should go solve that before you come talk to me." Like, that is amazing credibility for you to have, as a CISO. And so that's really important, is think about how if you have a therapist, if you don't have a therapist, you should think about getting one, by the way. But everything your therapist has in the office is designed to set you at ease or give you a thing to talk about. You should be designing your own office the same way.
So one of the things that you've written the book, How to CISO. And so we've talked about what it means to be a CISO in the field facing world, but now there's still these fundamentals on how to hold the room and do your job in this changing landscape. I actually wanted to go down that path with you for a little bit because we are going through a major transformation with companies as they're moving towards being traditional to their traditional technology to agentic systems and such. I'm actually kind of curious from your desk, from your position, what do you think the role of the CISO is kind of heading towards? And I think my more poignant question of that is, if you're a CISO right now who's trying to advise a company and help a company go through this transition, how can we, as a community, show up better in this moment? Because I think I'd love to get your thought on that.
So I think that the way the CISO is moving is it's really splitting into two different roles. And one role is I hate to say the word junior here, but sort of the right way to look at it, which is this is not really a C-level role, and you're never going to be treated that way. And a lot of privately held companies are doing this. They're hiring a CISO/CIO or a CISO and director of information technology, and they don't want an executive. But they're going to give you the executive title. But when you try to negotiate, being on the D&O, you're not getting any, form of liability protection. Good luck with that. And you're not going to be a CISO, but you're going to be tempted to take the CISO title because you can use that to go somewhere else. And I've seen a bunch of companies who have that role out there and they claim it's for an experienced person. And when you talk to a recruiter, because I've had those conversations, recruiter will reach out to me and I'm like, are you really looking for somebody with my experience? And they'll come back. They're like, yeah, no, we're not. Don't even bother having
for a director of IT who can handle endpoints.
Right, we're looking for somebody this would be their first CISO role. And so partly it's they just don't want to pay very much for it.
Yeah.
But there's a second role, which is really the CTO role, which is a CISO who's going to also be the CIO, who might be the chief AI officer. And this is for the people who want to solve problems. Because remember why we started in security many, many years ago. It was not to say no. It was because we saw people off solving problems and they were just doing it kind of recklessly. They were building e-commerce sites 25 years ago and they had no clue what they were doing. And we didn't show up and say what IT said. IT told them to stop and they said, screw you, I'm going to do this. Right? We showed up and said, how can we help you do this better? We'll pick up the pieces that you're not doing. And that's where we need to get back to, right? Our job is to say, how do we use AI safely? How do we deal with the fact that the companies are all pivoting to now, we have to pay for token usage. It's not all you can eat. So what does that mean? If you are a CISO and you're not giving advice about how to use AI cost affordably, effectively, and safely, then you are not really set up to be that true chief technologist. And that's where CISOs need to be headed. You want to be a chief technologist for the company.
And I think AI has really allowed us, the CISO community, to get back to what it was originally, right? Because I do think there was in the corner, do your thing, just make sure we don't end up in the news for probably the last 10, 15 years, let's say. I think if you're, and even if you're not being asked to do this in your role, if you're in one of those seats that maybe is a junior CISO, for want of a better title, if you can come to the table and say, hey, we can absolutely put pedal to the metal in terms of growth, AI adoption, and really lean into it and bring those solutions to your executive leadership team, all of a sudden you make yourself indispensable to the business. And you get the big kid seat, right?
I'm going to agree with you, but I'm going to give you a better piece of advice, which is you don't actually even want to be at the table to have that conversation. Because if you try to come to the table, you have to recognize there's a whole bunch of people around that table who have authority that rests in how other people perceive them. So you should go to your CMO and sit down privately with your CMO and say, hey, here's how to go use AI. Right? I understand what you're trying to do. Here's what we can do together. Same thing with your CRO. You should sit down with every executive leader. And it's only once you have all of their confidence that you're having a conversation with the whole executive leadership team. I think this is where a lot of CISOs shoot themselves in the foot. They think they have authority that is non-reputational, and they don't. So never surprise the team with a conversation. have that conversation with everybody beforehand. And right now with AI, they're all trying to look smarter than everybody else at the table. And so if you can show up and help them be smarter, they're going to love you for it.
I want to get your reaction to this. Something that I've, so first of all, for everyone who's met me in person, they know that I have this particular phrase I always attribute back to you as like this fundamental thing that grounded my entire existence around CISOing around. It's like our job as a CISO is to be a credible witness to the risk. And we discover risks, we price it in terms of the business, and then we coach and guide the business through it. But it's not our job to go fix the thing. It's our job to help and advise. But we have to be a credible witness to the risk. And so I'm wondering, how does that idea manifest itself in this moment of AI transformations? Do you see any change, or do you think it's the same principle, just different technology?
So I think because you have two different jobs, right? There is being the credible witness to the risk as the CISO. But if you want to be the chief technologist, you also have to be the credible driver of the business. Mm-hmm. And I think for security professionals, what's always been the challenge is you show up as a witness to the risk, but then you actually want to be the judge as well. And that's where we get into trouble, right? Is say, oh, the witness says this, and therefore. There is no therefore. And I really learned this hard. We had a new head of products, and he came in and he said, Andy, you can veto any product launch, right? You are one of the steps. They have to get a green light from you. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I've always wanted, right? This is what I've been told my whole career that security should get, is I should be able to say the risk of this is too big. And we had a product go to the launch meeting, and I will tell you, this product team did everything they could to not talk to my organization, right? And this is an early launch, like something very speculative, but it was a really dangerous sounding idea. Just to be very clear, very dangerous sounding idea. We get to the product launch meeting, and security is red because we haven't engaged at all. We've tried. We failed. And so I said, can't launch. It's red. And they're like, well, what are the risks? I'm like, we don't even know what the risks are because they won't talk to us. They said, are you going to kill $1 billion possibility on that? And I had this realization. I'm like, why am I the one in the line of this and not the product manager? So I went and I sat down with the head of products and I said, here's what we're going to do instead. Your product manager is going to articulate the risks to you at product launch. And I am just going to judge how faithful they are to that articulation. And then you get to decide if those are acceptable risks or not. And I'll sit here and I'll give you advice, but it's your decision. I don't get to kill your product launch. You're a president, like you're senior to me in the organization anyway. Like you should get to decide, but you should know what the risk is. And oh my God, the next product launch that came in that we had flagged red, we're like, they don't know what the risks are. They haven't bothered paying attention. He looked at them and he said, well, you're not launching now. And nobody else should ever hear those words out of Andy's mouth again.
There you go.
Boom, it worked. So that's being a credible witness to the risk. Like, did it happen? You want to be the chief technologist. The witnessing is important, but then you got to put on a different hat and say, how do we get the most reward out of that risk? How do I walk the walk that I want everybody else to walk and say, pay attention to the risk, but don't let it stop you?
And one of the things that I kind of sat with that for a long time, one of the things I would bring into other meetings is like, all I'm trying to do is make sure that we get a good ROI on our risk. It's like, as a business, that's what we do. We're in the business of risk. We're in the business of risk management. I just want to get rid of all the low return risk areas and let you get the upside for the big risks you want to take, and have your eyes wide open.
Because the important thing to remember is we are wired as humans to take risks. We get out of bed in the morning. That's a risk. We listen to podcasts. I mean, if somebody got here this far, right, they spent a bunch of their time to get this far. That's a risk. This might have been a worthless conversation, but hopefully you're like, oh no, that was really rewarding. It was worth my time. I didn't risk it. Like, we're just wired to do this. Why would we think our job is to eliminate risk? No, it's to eliminate wasteful risk.
I wanted to get your reaction as one this other idea. And before we start to wrap here, it's just, as you talk about being the CTO, where we're bringing in solutions. So like, we've got this foundation of awareness around the risk. Then we start to say, okay, how do we solve this problem in the moment we're in? I've been thinking like, how do you as a CISO show up in this moment? And one of the things that comes to my mind is like separating across speed. You need to address kind of 4 different areas. And that was speed, safety, stability, and scalability. Like, we have to have kind of those lenses that we're bringing across.
Can I just say 4 S's? You're bringing me back to a whole lot of TSA trauma at this point.
I'm a recovering consultant, so I apologize. Just be glad I didn't get to a 2x2 matrix,
Yeah.
So I just wonder, like, I wonder right now as CISOs are coming into this role, what are some of the, maybe a better question is like, what can CISOs be doing today?
So I think the really important thing is to recognize that security is not a first class discipline in your company, and it's never going to be.
Mhm.
Right? You're not going to sit as one of the 7 senior leaders as the CISO. Right? There's this your CEO has a weekly staff meeting somewhere of like 7 people that are making the decisions. The CISO is unlikely to ever sit in that room. And just come to terms with that. And that's okay. And the reason for that is that security is a subdiscipline of safety or quality, whatever you want to call it. Like we've got this nebula of do things the right way that involve your 4S's and a couple of others. And that's a really important discipline, just to be really clear. But it is unlikely that that's ever going to be enough to get you a seat at the table. Like I've been a CISO and acting CTO without the seat at the table, and that's okay, but just recognize that when you come into the role that your credibility exists because people see you and see you make good choices. So that's what actually started my vision to writing How to CISO, which by the way is free at howtociso.com. People can just go read all of the content. At some point I'll print it into a book just so I can do book signings. But what started this, I want to say, look, you've got 91 days from when you show up in a company to succeed. Because if you don't succeed in the first 91 days at satisfying the executive team that you're going to be the change agent that they want, might not be as much as you want, but whatever they want, then you're on a short fuse. And it might be
Yeah.
a longish short fuse. It might be 2 years. They might be like, oh, look, this person will not ruffle any feathers and we can pretend that we did the security thing, but fine, but you're not going to make big changes. So you've got 91 days. So the first ebook that I wrote was literally the first 91-day guide for CISOs.
I love where you're going with this, and I really appreciate that book because there is a lot of wisdom in that. I remember as I transitioned to my last organization, that was the first thing I was looking around. I was like, how do I do this whole 90 days as a CISO thing? And it really helped me as I went through my changes personally. So anyone who's listening to this, I would recommend go read that. And the pro move is to read that while you're in seat somewhere else.
Yes,
And
read
so
it before you get started.
exactly.
But you can read it while you're in transition, while you're looking. And the reason that I named it the first 91 day guides isn't just because I'm pedantic and 91 days is a quarter of a year. It's so that you can Google CISO 91 and it'll be the first non-sponsored hit. Although now the number of people who are sponsoring traffic on it tells me it must be resonating.
It really is. And with that, Andy, I just want to thank you for your time coming on the show today. I mean, what I love about this is you have coming with 20 plus years in Akamai, where 30% of the world's internet was going over this. You have seen this at scale. Your team has solved everything from problems with Heartbleed to so much more
Yep.
that's come out of your desk. You've led product delivery, like product creation categories, and you're in it. You're not on the sidelines. You're helping us like with the next generation saying, okay, how do you show up as a CISO really well? How do you show up as the executive correctly? And then how do we also how do we help vendors arrive in the market correctly to ultimately give us a more secure infrastructure? So just want to say, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've got massive respect for you.
Thanks for
having me. It's been an
me.
absolute pleasure.
Ton of fun. Thanks, Andy. If today's conversation gave you something useful, a framework, a question worth sitting with, a way to position something you're already dealing with, that's the point. Connect with Conor and I on LinkedIn. The links are in the show notes. Tell us what landed.
And if you know another security leader who's navigating the same pressure, text them this episode. We'll see you next time.
Resonate.